Today I'm going to show you how to hang a valance like a pro. Then we're going to show you how to hang one of our lined layered valances, and then we're going to graduate to a set of lined gathered swags. So the first thing we do is we make sure that we have our curtain hardware in place, which we do, and that we have our curtain rod handy, which we do. So you start with the fat end of the curtain rod, and this is just a normal curtain rod like you would find in any big box store. And you take the fat end and you find your valance, and you make sure that the hem of the valance is on the same side as where the rod curves in. That will prevent you from hanging your valance up backwards, which I've done many times. Okay, so when you're starting to string up a valance on a valance rod, it always helps if you consider the end. Like, I want there to be nice flowing pleats in this valance. So what I do is I gather it and I pull it in about 8 inches at a time, which sort of goes ahead and puts pleats in there already. Now this is just the beginning step, so we've got a lot more to go. All right, now we insert the other end in and we climb up the ladder. All right, once you have the curtain rod affixed to the hardware, then you start working the valance. I always start from one end and I put a nice little pleat in there, and then I take my fingers and spread them apart about that far and pull another pleat in. And I keep doing this until I get to the end of the valance, which doesn't really take very long. Okay, let me move my ladder over here. Kind of go back and straighten along the way as I'm going. And when I get towards the other end, I do the same thing for the end so that my two ends look nice and pretty well match. Okay, now as you can see, I've got a little bit of a gap down here. So what I'm going to do at this point is start sliding things out so that I can kind of even them up a little bit. You notice that I grab them from both the top and the bottom, so I'm moving the whole pleat at one time, and so it doesn't come apart on me. Okay, after I feel like I've got them spread pretty well across the rod, I'll go back and make sure that the spacing is about even. And your hands make great measuring tools, and I'll show you this a little bit more when we work with the lined layered valance. But I kind of go, all right, there's about 1 finger's worth. This one needs to be spread apart just a little bit more. Okay, so they're all kind of evenly spaced. At that point, I go back and make sure that the top is all straight. And then you stand back and admire your work. Okay, next we're going to start with a lined layered valance. Now, our lined layered valances have nice scallops in the bottom, and so the object of the drill here is to make sure that the scallops all fall evenly across the window. So again, we start with the large end of the curtain rod, and you make sure that the bend in the rod is facing the back of the valance, and you insert it into the rod pocket, which most of the Park Designs window treatments have a 2-inch rod pocket with an 1.5 inch header above. So make sure that you're putting your rod into the rod pocket and not the header. Okay, and again, I always try and pull about the same amount. That way it kind of gets you started on working on your pleats. Okay, now that we have the curtain strung on the rod, we're going to hang it up here. All right, again, once you have the curtain rod affixed to the wall, you go ahead and start moving your valance over. Now, here's what I'm doing. You take the longer part of the pleat, or you take the longer part of the scallop and you move it over. Again, I grab the longer part and I move it over. What this does is it forces this to come out and the shorter part to go in. Okay, so here we go again. Pull the longer part out. I'm going to move my ladder over a little bit here. And you just kind of keep working it across the rod until they're all more or less evenly spaced. Again, on the end, you make sure that it looks like the other end. Now, one thing I always try to keep in mind is where the middle of the window is. So here you see I've got probably too much on the left-hand side and not enough on the right-hand side as far as the gathers. So I'm going to slide my gathers to the left a little bit so we kind of even them out. And that way you've got the break in the middle of the window. And I usually will go back through and pull on the bottom just a little bit, kind of fluff out the pleats. Go back and straighten up the top and make sure none of the little pleats are falling over backwards. And then I make one last check on spacing. And again, like I said, your hands make great measuring tools. So I touch the center to my pinky and the other center to my thumb. That's pretty even. That's pretty even. Now this one, he's got a little work to be done. I'm going to slide him over like that. Go back and check and make sure I haven't messed those guys up. There we go. And move my ladder one more time here. And this one needs to be moved over just a hair. Okay. And then, again, you stand back and admire your work. Now, for the final thing that we're going to do today, we're going to hang a set of lined gathered swags, which is just a little bit more complicated than your typical valance. Now, I've already ironed these pieces, which I would always advise ironing window treatments before you hang them. It makes such a difference in their presentation after you've got them hung. Okay, this is a pair of line gathered swags. You'll notice there's a rope that comes out on one end and it's shorter on the other side. So what you want to do is you want to string them on your curtain rods so that the longest sides fall at the end of the curtain rods. So again, I insert the fat end of the curtain rod into the rod pocket, again pulling fairly even spaces. And then, to make sure that I've got the long ends on both sides of the curtain rod, I start with the short end, knowing that it's going to wind up in the middle. I insert the curtain rod into the rod pocket and pull fairly even amounts until I've got it all on there. I insert the other end of the curtain rod in, and then we start to work on our window. Okay. Now that we have our rod affixed to the window, I'm going to slide this over, and I always start working from the middle when I start with longer panels. That way I've got things kind of centered. So, first thing I'm going to do is make sure that the center of the line gathered swag is in the center of the window, which, as you can see, this is just about center of the window. Now, once you've established that your curtain is pretty well centered on the window, I always like to start from one side, and again, like I did in the valances, try and put some pleats in here. And I use my hand as kind of a measurer for how deep the pleat should be. And I'll usually put 4 to 5 pleats in each side, but I put the same amount. If I put 4 on one side, I do 4 on the other. Now, in a minute, it's going to look like I'm totally messing this up, but it does help. All right, now I'm going to move this over, and we're going to do the same procedure for over here. We're going to start about the same amount back on this side as we've done on this side, so you put about the same spacing. I'll put a pleat in there with my hand. I'll go over here and do another. Sometimes you have to kind of start at the bottom and pull down just to make sure everybody's cooperating. And then we get one at the end. So we've got 1, 2, 3, whoops, here we go, 4. All right, now comes the tricky part. And I want to start on this side. What we do now is come back over here. You'll notice we've got 4 fairly even pleats, and it doesn't matter if they're really even because, like I said, it's going to look like I'm messing this whole thing up at this point, but it does help. Right. Now, once you've got all your pleats in place, you find the string, and I always like to start on the right-hand side because I'm right-handed, and you start pulling the string and you work in gathers, and you work the gathers all the way across the window treatment. And what I do is I like to pull them from the pleats. This kind of gives you a nice even hanging. You can already see it's starting to take shape. And at this point, I'm going to stop on this side and I'm going to work the other side. So we've still got a little bit of fluffing to do at the end of this to make sure that both sides are equal and that everything's hung like we want it to be. Okay, again, we start over here and we locate our string, and then we start putting the gathers in. And you just pull the string and work the gathers across to the other side. See, this is where I was telling you a little while ago that it was going to look like I was messing up everything I'd done earlier. But it does help. Okay. Okay, now at this point I'm going to come down off the ladder and I'm going to take a look at it, and we're just going to see if everything is even, if we've got about the same size pleats in both sides, and most importantly, if our curvature at the top is even and symmetrical. Okay, you can see that right now it's not. This side's hanging a little bit lower, left is hanging a little lower than the right. So what we're going to do to fix that is we're going to pull a little more pleat in it, because what that does is it forces the corner to go up. Okay. On this side, I'm going to release just a little bit of the pleat so that that goes down a little bit. Okay. Now, I'm going to start working my pleats down to the bottom to make sure that I have nice even gathers all throughout the valance. Okay. Now, another thing I like to do, gives it a little bit more of a romantic feel if you push the gathers from the top across to the middle. It still allows these to hang straight, but it gives you a little bit more romantic feel. And you always like to hide your cord behind here. Now, if you're very brave and think that it's going to stay on this window for a long time, you can tie it off at the top and cut it short. If you ever need to move it though, or take it down to wash it, you're going to want to leave the cord here, maybe just roll it up and tie it. You want to have the ability to gather it again after you wash or send to the dry cleaners. Okay. Now, move this over just a little bit to make sure they're both centered. Okay, again, make sure that I've got even pleats in here. There we go. I'll hide the cord on this side. And once you get done, stand back and make sure that everything is still as even as it needs to be. There we are. Okay. Now again, you stand back, you take a look, you make sure your pleats on both sides are pretty even. Make sure that it's falling at about the same place in the middle, that you're centered. And one way you can tell is you've got the white parts of the window back here that kind of you can guide by. It's like if you see more on one side than you do the other, you know you need to do just a little bit of shifting. So I'm going to shift this over just a hair. Okay. I'm going to do one last primp on the top so that all our little gathers are standing up straight. And you stand back and admire your handiwork. This has been an instruction from Park Design on how to hang window treatments. Thank you for your attention.